Hello, this is going to be the first trial run of my new Imputer tool. On my screen it shows up as beta, but it's not quite ready for beta testing yet, as I haven't even tried it myself. So this will be in version 2.0 of Borland Genetics, along with my new progress bars that you'll see in a second. So first, let's load my resources. Load resource list, and I've created a special resource list for this Imputer project, and that is project Impute Sally. So let's take a look at our resources we have here. We have Sally, Richard clade, Ancestry version 1, version 2. So it's a combined Ancestry version 1, version 2 template, and the reason for that is because Sally did not test. This is a reverse phased kit where Richard is the parent, who is Sally's child, and we reverse phased Richard using his children. And his children tested more recently and on Ancestry version 2 template, so I combined the templates so I can capture as many of the SNPs tested as possible in our reconstruction of Sally. So first step, which is not shown, is that we created this Sally reverse phased kit by reverse phasing Richard first with his son Daniel and second with his daughter Emily. Now, you still, either way, when we reverse phase with one child, it still creates the exact same 50% kit or coverage of Sally as if we had reverse phased with his other child. But the reason I did them both is that they can be added together, not in terms of adding coverage, but to increase resolution, because a lot of the no calls that occurred in the reverse phase process were not in the same place when we used the other child. So it really filled a lot of the gaps having two. Okay, so who are Eloise, Johann, Max, and Salmine? Those are Sally's grandparents. Sally's father was Arthur. Arthur's parents are Max and Eloise. Sally's mother was May, and May's parents are Johann and Salmine. So I have reconstructed kits here for Max, Eloise, Johann, and Salmine. And the way these were produced is a little different. These were created using the Humpty Dumpty tool, combining pieces of Eloise, Johann, Max, and Salmine found in about 10 of her descendants and pieced together and they were isolated in each of the descendants using various tools in my toolkit, depending on the particular relationship and what resources were available. So the problem the Imputer tries to solve is as follows. Look at the coverage for Max is 27%, and Eloise is 28%. Those are pretty high, and even Johann and Salmine are 18 and 16%. So the goal is to see if we can't get Sally's coverage higher than 50%, even though only descendants of one of her children have tested. So what we have, when we're going to look at Sally's ancestors in DNA Painter, before we impute any data, let's say Sally ancestors. We have 50% coverage, and if you look at chromosome 1, for example, it bounces back. First, it starts out on the top chromosome, which is paternal. DNA inherited from Eloise, and then switches to some maternal DNA. Richard was passed. Sally's maternal DNA, that is. All of this is maternal to Richard. He got some Johann, and then he got some Salmine, and then it switches back. There was a recombination at the parent level. He gets some from Max, and then another recombination at the parent level to get some more DNA from May. Not sure which grandparents in that case. But the goal is for example, where there's a gap here between Eloise and Max on the paternal chromosome, to fill some of that in. Now, theoretically, we know some of the left portion of that gap is probably going to be red. It's probably going to be Eloise. And some of the right portion is going to be Max. It's going to be yellow. And we don't know exactly how far it extends and where the recombination took place. We know there's an odd number of recombinations because it starts out red and ends up yellow on the right side of the gap, but it could be 1, 3, 5. It's most likely 1 with a gap this small. And we have similar predictions we can make when the gap, say on chromosome 5, is red on both sides. So we can guess that if this gap between the two reds was small enough, that we should fill it with more red. That would be filling it with more Eloise data. However, we must take into account the potential for even number of crossovers here or recombinations. That it could be 2, it could be red and then have a yellow in the middle and then some red on the side, or it could be any even number, but we can have some sense of what the odds of multiple recombinations in a span using the definition of centimorgan. And based on that, since we have a lot of Max and Eloise from other branches of the family who tested, a lot more parts of Max and Eloise than what's shown in this diagram that only Sally donated. Only Sally inherited. So we're going to use that gap. We're going to use that data from Max and Eloise to fill this gap, and we're going to do it using a statistical model based on the definition of the centimorgan and based on the boundary conditions of each gap and how many, whether it's an even, odd, or both types of number of recombinations are allowed in that gap to meet the boundary conditions that we observe. So I hope that makes sense. But we'll see, you'll get to see how this works a little more because the tool is very visual. Let's go back to toolkit, back to the main menu, and let's run the imputer through for the first time. So selecting the target. Here the target is the person that I intend to impute more data for, and that is Sally. I want to get her from 50 maybe to 55% or so using this method, I'm guessing. Select. Okay, now we select the build coordinates used to perform the visual phasing, which in this case I used GEDmatch data, and that we're talking about to paint these segments, like the number 107530641. Those are numbers that I got from GEDmatch comparing DNA kits. Let's see. So now, it's important not to mix and match, by the way, and we had a couple discussions about this in the DNA Painter group and in my Borland Genetics group yesterday. It's okay to use either. It's not very good idea to mix and match if you're using these tools. And you'll really see problems on some chromosomes, like chromosome 19, if you in fact do decide to mix and match. So just something to pay attention to. All right, so we use build 36 coordinates from GEDmatch. Continue. Okay, so now it wants me to select the DNA Painter file, and I already exported that to a CSV in advance, and that is Sally Ancestors. So it's going to load the export to memory. Okay, so it has no way of telling which grandparent pair we're going to do first, but the tool requires us to choose a pair of grandfather and grandmother, and it has to be on the same side. So we can either pick Sally's paternal grandparents or Sally's maternal grandparents, because that's what we're looking for, the gaps between them, right? So let's start with paternal first. Well, let's take a look at Max is the grandfather. Select who's the grandmother, and that would be Eloise. Select. Okay. Are these the target's paternal or maternal grandparents? And it's important that the software knows which, so that it can handle the X chromosome properly. So we'll tell it that these are the paternal grandparents of Sally. Is there an unresolved checklist group associated with this grandparent pair? The answer is no, and let me show you what that means. I keep track of whether or not I was able to sort or divide each of these segments by grandparent. For Max and Eloise, or for Arthur's parents, to separate Arthur's segments, the top the top copy of each chromosome on this chart, into Max and Eloise was pretty easy for me because of very high cousin match density, if you want to call it that, when I use the matching segment tool in GEDmatch. That's because Max is Jewish and because Eloise is mostly from colonial New York families. And they have a lot of descendants who have tested, and it was easy to find cousins on almost every segment, except for a couple of Eloise's German segments, which have very low match density. But I was able to easily discern whether they belong to Eloise or Max. So then that's not the case, however, for May, for Sally's mother. This is a nice example where I was able to, determine this is Johann and this is Salmine, and on the same segment, even there's a recombination there. But this is an example where I couldn't do that. And I call these black segments, I painted them black, I call them unresolved checklist segments, and that's just my own terminology. And the reason it needs to know, by the way, I'm going to click on May unresolved, and it'll show you all of them. So there are quite a few there, and the reason is because Scandinavian DNA can have very low match density. Not 100% sure why, but that just happens to be the case. So, and also I still am not quite done with this. There's probably a lot more drilling down I can do if I start to contact perhaps some of my cousin matches that I do have that I wasn't able to assign to either Johann or Salmine. And but that's something we're going to continue doing later. So why does it need to know whether or not there are any checklist segments? Whether there's whether there's a group, which is May unresolved, dedicated to the checklist segments? The answer is because they should be reflected in the boundary conditions. The reason has to do with statistical independence. When you talk about a recombination like this one here between Eloise and Johann, where that's on the parent level, right? So that's whether or not Sally passed Richard, her father's DNA, Arthur's DNA, and then switched to the mother, to May's DNA. But that's completely statistically independent of whether or not there are any switches on the grandparent level, such as between Johann and Salmine. So that's not the case, however, when we have an unresolved segment like this one here, because we know that there is some sort of recombination after this Johann segment, and it may very well be at the grandparent level. So we don't want to call this a, statistically independent boundary when it may very well be a transition right there from blue back to green, from Johann back to Salmine. And we just don't know, so the model will make better predictions if we include these segments as a separate category, if there is one. But as I was saying, for Max and Eloise, there is none because I was able to complete all of the sections. So the answer is no. Please select the grandfather from the list below. Now this is actual DNA kits that are stored in the active resource list of Borland Genetics. Max, Eloise. Note how it'll only pick the female ones for grandmother. Okay, select. All right, these are my new snazzy progress bars. I'm still working on them, but I think it's a little better than the version 1 progress bars that just kind of fly up everywhere and look ugly. And also there's overall progress for most of the tools in these. So it analyzes the boundary conditions of the gaps, and then it applies the statistical model. In this part, the statistical model takes a while to apply. The math is quite complicated. So it's going to prepare some visualizations. This is going to be a very visual tool, and you'll see that in a minute. Or two. I guess that's another thing about having an overall progress bar like this. On some of the longer, some of the tools that take longer to run, especially if you have a ton of DNA that you're feeding it. Like if you use the dark side kit, for example, with like 10 relatives at once or something, by the overall progress, I guess you'd be able to tell if you have time to go grab some lunch while the tool runs, or whether it'll be done in a few minutes. But here we're already, looks like about 75% done, maybe. And if I remember correctly, I think I did some of the easier math at the end, so it may go faster as we go here. And we're actually going to go through this twice because I want to do Johan and Salmin as well. I want to actually create a kit of Sally with all the imputed data ready to go and upload it to GEDmatch. You can compare the new one to the old one, or to the 50% reverse phase version of Sally, rather. Getting there. If I can improve the efficiency of this, maybe I can get it eventually to do the math while the graphics are on the screen, but for now that's not possible. All right, so this is our interface. On the left side, we have maximum theoretically imputable segments. This would represent what we are able to impute if we had 100% reconstructions of max and LOEs. And we don't, but we have pretty good ones. We have 27 and 28%. On the right side is actual segments to be imputed. And those are the ones that are going to be able to add it to Sally's file based on what DNA we actually have in the reconstructions of max and LOEs as compared to the theoretical model on the left. Now, I have the fader at the bottom. It's a confidence level. So at 100%, these two sides are going to be the same, because we could really only say with 100% confidence that the segments already there are correct for Sally. If we want to talk about absolute, 100% certainty. So the segments you're seeing now on the screen are the ones that are already painted using the reverse phase tool with her son Richard. So it should look very familiar. You see there's two gaps on the top, right? And if we go back to our DNA painter, you'll see one gap here between LOEs and max, and one gap at the end after max, right? And so there should be one in the middle, one in the end, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. So now what happens if we slide the slider to 95%? I did in increments of 5. Look at that. Okay, so one thing I noticed right away is the X chromosome at the bottom. They're in order. This chromosome 1 is on top, goes down to 22, and then the X chromosome at the bottom. It flashed over to pink, which is LOEs. Why? Because these are the paternal grandparents, and an X cannot be transmitted from a paternal grandfather, because that would require going from father to son, from grandfather to father, actually. And X can never be transmitted between two males because a father gives his son a Y chromosome. So we know that the entire X is going to be LOEs. I suppose I could have put this in 100% view as well, but I wanted that to be the sort of the start screen before anything is imputed, so you can really get a feel for what's going on. And on the bottom left, you see that on the maximum theoretically imputable segments, the entire chromosome flashed over to pink. And I kept the line so you could see what's new. However, on the actual segments to be imputed, there is only information imputed on the right side of that pre-existing segment in the middle. And why? Simply because none of the other descendants who were used to reconstruct Eloise had inherited any portion of that little sliver of X at the tip on the left. More precisely, no two of them did, because in order to add such a segment to Eloise's reconstruction, it had to be phasable or removable from the other. Anyway, that's a topic for a different day. But it suffices to know that there was just no reconstruction for Eloise over that particular segment. Now, if I slide it over a little more, you can see some other things happening. Let's start with 90. Some more flashovers on the left side. And what is happening when there are no flashovers is kind of what I talked about before. If you look at the first gap on the top of on chromosome 1, on the top chromosome there, you see a little pink, little Eloise on the left side of the gap, and a little blue Max on the right side of the gap. They're almost like forming stalagmites and stalactites. You can almost think of it like. And if the statistics are right, it'll flash over. There, it's an odd number of recombinations, so it's never going to actually tell you the exact recombination point. But the flashovers will happen when you have an even number, and it becomes 90% likely that there was no recombination between there. Then you get a flashover. Okay, so let's slide it over all the way and watch more of this fill in. So you really get a nice picture of what Sally, what her genes look like, what her paternal chromosomes anyway for now, what they looked like. Notice there are some chromosomes like 22 and 21 down there at the bottom that even in the theoretical model have no data. And that's because we have no boundary conditions on either side. So it's impossible to predict. Well, it's not impossible to predict, but it's equally likely that that segment can be pink or blue anywhere across it because we have no boundary conditions to go by. So those chromosomes are omitted. They're not able to be reconstructed. So on the right side, on the actual segments, there's quite a bit there. I mean, there's not as many as on the left side, of course, but one would think that maybe a quarter or so of the real estate that was added to Sally on the left will be actually able to add, because those are about 1/4 reconstructions of each that we're working with for Max and Eloise. And why did I stop at 75? Mostly because I don't want people uploading junk to GEDmatch, and I think that's a perfectly reasonable minimum amount to minimal confidence level to impute. And you don't just want to be making complete guesses, which is what you'd be doing, I think, beyond that point, or if you try to use the imputer twice in a row. But let's not get into that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at 75 as my first demo for this kit. For this tool, and let's click continue. We get another progress bar here. It's extracting the imputed data. Now it starts with I don't remember which order, but I think it starts with Max. So it's got to load the DNA resources. Does some compatibility checking. Performing merge calculations. Some of these levels of the progress bar just flash from 0 to 100%. I haven't put intermediate increments yet. I will work on that. Some of them it's kind of hard to because there's not a counter or anything like that. But it shouldn't take too long. Okay, moving on to identifying matching segments. presumably saving Max to the data library. Or not, I'm sorry, not saving Max, but saving the portions of Max that we can impute to Sally, to be more precise. Make it a zip file for GEDmatch, although I'm not actually going to upload this intermediate file to GEDmatch, but it doesn't know that. Eventually, I will give these tools a little bit more of a artificial intelligence sort of a twist, where it will be able to predict things like whether or not it's likely that you would upload something to GEDmatch, or whether it's intermediate, and give you some guidance on what parts of your family these tools are useful on, based on whatever particular DNA resources you have. But I'm a little way off from that. I've got a plan or a system to do it, but I haven't actually even begun the programming on that yet. Extracting imputed data. So now it must be on LOEs. Okay. Saving DNA resource to library. All right, I think it's almost done. And when it is done, we'll just go into our, we don't have to go to the data library. We can just look in our resource manager, make sure it did it properly. It's going to automatically assign names for these kits, by the way. Okay, reconstructed imputed resources successfully added to the active resource list. Turn to menu. Let's take a look at the active resource list in our manage DNA resources. And look what we got here now. We've got 2% each. And those numbers won't have to be the same for each grandparent. It's a coincidence that they are here. So we have added 2% for via Max and 2% via LOEs we can add to Sally. It hasn't actually added them all together yet, because it lets the user decide exactly what it wants to merge and what it wants to for example, whether maybe I want to pick 75% confidence for this side, and I want to choose 90% confidence when it comes to Johan and Salmin for some reason. I don't, but it gives you that kind of flexibility. So let's go back to the main menu. Let me save my resource list. I always like to save when I add something new to it, just in case something happens, my power goes out, who knows. So let's save the resource list. Okay, back to the main menu. I'm going to do it through this a little faster, and if you think you got it, you can fast forward over this until we get to the merging and then see, but didn't take that long. Okay, select the target, and again, it's going to be Sally, although we got 3 of them now. We just got to make sure we pick the right one. We want just a plain old Sally Richard plate, the one from the reverse phase. Okay, so select. Build coordinates, again, 36 I used. I really like GEDmatch's matching segment tool, and that's why I use 36, even though it's a little behind the times. And my software is able to convert them as long as you're consistent within a single map. Okay. Sally ancestors, same thing. We're using the same map. Okay, which is the grandfather? This time Johan. Which is the grandmother? This time Salmin, who is Sally's namesake. Select. Are these the targets? This time it's the maternal grandparents. Is there an unresolved checklist group? This time there is. If you remember, I have a May unresolved. Continue. So now we pick that one, May unresolved. That way it treats all the gaps properly for the statistical model. Please select the grandfather. And now this is the DNA kits from the resource list. We got Johan. And for the mother, our grandmother, we got Salmin. Let's say select. All right, now we wait again while it gets ready for the visualization. Don't have much to say because we've already sat through this once, but I am kind of excited to see the results. Pairing gap visualizations. I think I've made too many demos with the same backgrounds picture. I'm gonna have to change that soon. That's my neighborhood though. Head to Florida in a few days for vacation, so maybe I'll put up some nice pictures of palm trees or something like that. Getting there. All right, so same idea. Although notice like on chromosome 1, instead of seeing before, we saw a gap where that data is, and now we're looking at the opposite chromosome. This is the opposite copy of the chromosome. We're looking at Sally's maternal copy. Okay. Slide it over. And not as much, but were there any complete flashovers? Yeah, sure. Just about anyway. 23, 22, 21, 22. Looks like on chromosome 17 maybe, or no, 16. Chromosome 16 is practically that whole first part. It looks like was, or that whole gap was filled in nearly by Salmine data that we have available. All right, well, we've already seen this, so let's continue and actually get on with the calculations. And I plan on putting this out real soon, so you'll have a chance to play with it if you have enough data, which some of you may have because if you've used my toolkit steadily for a month or so, maybe you've gotten to the point where this tool will be useful to you. I really had designed this with the or the whole toolkit for that matter, with the goal, I guess you'd say, of being able to like go to a family reunion and just like take like 30 DNA tests of family members and just piece together every possible ancestor, and then use those ancestor reconstructions to to go back and impute downward and fill in some of the missing relatives. So. And then the creeper tool will just sort of be a guide. It'll take you through the process in the most logical order when it's done, and but that'll be a while. So for now, you have to create your own workflows, or just ask someone in our. If you're new, ask someone in our users group maybe what the best workflow is for your goal, and it's enough people in there now that seem to really know what they're doing that can help you. And I think some people have become more experts in using the tools than I have. But hopefully over the Thanksgiving break, I'll have a chance to actually use these tools on my own family data a little more, as opposed to just developing new tools. I've got a few visual phasing projects in progress that I haven't gotten around to finishing too. And I saw a bunch of new matches on Ancestry.com. Okay, getting there. I wasn't paying too much attention to the progress, but I think this is already on Salmine. Let's see, what are we up to as far as time? Oh, I didn't start a time. Just when I play back the video, I can see how long the whole process took. Getting there. Somebody's saving probably Salmine's portions. All right, let's go back to the resource list. So we got 1% each. For Salmine and Johan, we got 1% each. All right, but that's not bad considering I'm still not done with that process. So let's create, I guess, we could do this all in one step, but for fun, let's do it in 2 steps. Let's go, well, save. We'll lose any data, especially since this is a trial run. There's what can go wrong. Okay, so back to the main menu. Let's go to the Humpty Dumpty tool, put things back together again. Let's start by making a mono kit. I always like to go to stereo as the last possible time. And we can create a mono kit with all 4 of these new files. Why? Because we know they're never going to overlap each other, any of those segments. Because what this mono kit that I'm going to merge 1, 2, 3, 4 files. We're going to get a partial reconstruction, essentially, of Richard's maternal evil twin. Because, right, these are all the things that Sally did not give Richard, or some fraction of what Sally didn't give Richard that she could have. So let's make a mono kit out of those first. Also, it gives me the opportunity to test the progress bars for each of those tools. If I do the mono merge first and then stereo merge later, make sure the progress bars are working for both. Looks like they're working okay. Still loading the files. I guess it's got to load 4 of them, right? I'm keeping track. Oh, I don't need to keep track because the loading DNA resources looks like it's about 75% done, so this must be the last one. All right. So now it's actually doing the calculations for the merge. So what do we have? 2, 2, 1, and 1 as far as percentages. but that's, rounded, so I'm going to guess 5% additional coverage. 5% of evil Richard. I could probably break down the progress here to another level just to make time seem to go by faster, I suppose. But it'll be done soon enough. There we go. Now it's going. That last part went quickly. Select the name. Let's call it Richard, maternal evil. All right, continue. All right, saving. Zipping. We're getting there now. So let's take a look and see what our additional coverage is going to be. There it is at the top. Richard maternal evil, not the top, fourth from the top. Richard maternal evil is 5%. All right, that's right about what we'd expect. So save. Now let's do the final merge, and we're going to merge back to the main menu. We're going to go to the Humpty Dumpty, and this time we're going to merge to stereo. We're going to make a stereo version of Sally. We're going to combine her 50% original reconstruction with the new imputed data, maternal evil Richard. Okay, and in theory, this should result in a 55% get, right? But again, this is the trial run, so anything could go wrong. Sounds like today's garbage day outside. All right, for this tool, each kit must be on the same template. Uh-oh. Turn to menu. Let's try the chameleon tool and see. I don't know what template. All right. And Sally played. Not sure why they're not on the same template. But anyway, select. Ooh, I don't think I made a combined. Nope, I didn't create a combined progress bar yet for the chameleon tool. I'll have to do that. All right. So let's map them both to a combined template. guess the Max, Eloise, and/or Salmin and Johan reconstructions were on a template other than the combined ancestry version 1 and version 2. I don't remember which template I used when I created those. It was a few months ago. Or let's hope that's the case. Of course, the other possibility is that the tool didn't work, but we've gotten this far. And a lot of this using this toolkit is going to be trial and error, and I realize it's not quite the most user-friendly interface yet. Hopefully, when I design the creeper tool, it'll fix that a bit, but I think I got to speed up this this tool's operation a bit too. Find a faster way to convert the templates. But my approach, I think, is get everything up and working first, and then start meddling with the procedures to try to get them to run faster and more efficiently. I assume it's doing the second one now. Yep. Oh, I probably should have done. I should have just mapped one of them onto the AV1 V2 template. It's kind of silly of me. It would have taken half as much time. Plus, I'd know what my output template is. Here, I'm not really going to know what template was used. A few more minutes. Then we'll just do that last merge to stereo and upload the GEDmatch, assuming all goes well here. Make sure I'm making a lot of noise outside. Getting there. Not sure why it's loading another resource from the library. Okay. Anyway, I'm just going to call it now Richard Maternal Evil RME combined template. All right. And then save that one. And I've had a couple suggestions to make some of these where you select the file name closer to the beginning of the process. I'm either going to do that or probably leave them where they are and instead have some sort of visual reminders, like a little picture of a family tree to ask you where the name of the person is, so it'll be obvious whose name you're supposed to put in there. All right, select the name for Sally, Richard, Cliff, blah, 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 SRC combined. Let's call it for now. Then we're going to merge them for real. Okay, turn to main menu. Let's go Humpty Dumpty, merge to stereo. Select. And by the way, why are they distinct clades of Sally? Because Richard and his evil twin are separate siblings for purposes of DNA reconstruction. Okay, let's go. Let's just take the two combined. And again, we're hoping for 55% coverage. And we're really hoping they're on the same template this time. Okay. With two kits, I don't think this took that long. Getting there. Looks like it's done. All right, select name to be associated with this. Sally 75, let's call it, because we Sally 75% confidence. Continue. All right, let's take a look at the active list. See what we got. Sally 75, stereo, female, 55%, success. Well, save the resource list, and I don't want to count my chickens before they hatch here, because we haven't actually uploaded this thing to GEDmatch and examined it yet. Yeah, so let's replace it. Now let's go to GEDmatch. Upload, generic, computer test. All right, female. I said female, but I clicked the wrong one. Yes. And now it's a synthetic or artificial kit. And there we go. Let's go to data library. Find it. Yeah, I'm amassing quite an amount of kits here. Sally 75, 55%. There we go. I'm going to select the zip version, of course, because that's what GEDmatch accepts. And let's upload it. And this takes a lot less time to upload now that someone pointed out that I wasn't compressing my zip files and pointed that out to me, and I fixed that. Thank you for that. So we won't be able to use this for one-to-many searches yet because it would take, hours to process, 8 to 16 hours typically with GEDmatch, but maybe I'll post some screenshots tomorrow or something. But for now, I guess we could test it by just doing a couple one-to-ones, like maybe seeing if this version of Sally matches me better than the other one did. Maybe I have some of those segments that were imputed in my genome. Who knows? If not, maybe my grandmother does. I reconstructed a kit for her. Hopefully, now the new Sally will be a higher match to my grandmother, maybe. They were sisters. Okay, there we go. So I got a kit number. Back. Otherwise, you have to sign back in. All right, I'm going to do a couple one-to-ones. Let's set it up. 2 screens here. Kit number, copy and pasting. Now, I don't know, let's, oh, no, we want to have one, right? All right, that's going to be the imputed Sally. Now let's get rid of this and have this screen be the one to test the original Sally. There's her old kit number from the reverse phase. Okay, now let's check her against me. Same over here. Okay, so the old one, or the simple reverse phase one, 24 matching segments. She matched me 483.7. The new one, look at that. Now she matches me at 601. And, well, that's great. So I don't even have to look at my grandmother's right now. I can wait until it finishes processing. But you can see that's a nice improvement. Even though it's only 5% more of Sally, it happens to be some of the, I guess what it means is my DNA was useful in adding DNA to Sally. Probably some portion of my DNA when we did this project now is being incorporated into Sally's reconstruction. So that's kind of cool. All right, until next time.